Blood filled the place. That was where ordinary people threw away their humanity for the sake of brutality. To our boy, it was disgusting and pathetic. He was approached to pay the entry fee. At that moment, Kylan noticed a silver-haired girl. It looked like she was mute, and she was trying to guide him to where he should go next. He noticed the tips of her ears had been cut, and she didn't look comfortable in those clothes. Around the necks of those girls was a tracking device, so they couldn't escape. The mute girl gestured again, pointing to the knower 27. It seemed like she wanted him to place a bet now, so he blended in with he could get what he came for. The rule there was simple: if you win your bet, you get money fast. Our boy made a small fortune. Some men started talking about it. It was time for a special fight against an undefeated fighter. So far, his opponent was a rookie. This was the person Kyan wanted to find, the one who in his past life said he had been trapped in a place where he had to fight to survive until his sister died, the Naikiri, but right now, he was still a slave, a gladiator, the real treasure Kylan had come to find. Without hesitating, Kylan bet everything he had on that fighter, leaving the mute girl stunned, a risky bet that left the onlooker shocked, thinking the boy had to be crazy, and they weren't wrong. Up to now, Kiri hadn't won anything. A veteran gambler said what our boy did was reckless. It wasn't worth betting everything on someone who'd never won, but our boy wouldn't budge. He told the mute girl to make sure the bet went through. After that, the veteran gambler did what his conscience told him to do, warn the rookie that fight was going to be a complete massacre. Even inside the cage, Kiri realized what had happened. The undefeated fighter said that crazy bettor was about to lose everything. The shackles holding them were unlocked. The fight had barely started, and Kiri was already forced to defend against devastating blows. Every block hurt almost as much as taking a clean hit. The gladiator landed a strike to Kiri's stomach, making him spit blood from the impact. Now, the protagonist started to get nervous. Without a sword, he knew Kiri wasn't that dangerous, but he believed in that fierce fighter's potential. The gray-haired knight's strikes weren't fast, he was getting crushed slowly. There was nothing to do during the beating. The final blow was headed for his face, until the protagonist shouted to Kiri that he shouldn't expose his shoulder during the opponent's attack. The gladiator listened, managing to dodge a strike aimed at his skull, and finding a good opening to counterattack, crushing the thug's ribs. If the guy's bones weren't made of rubber, they definitely cracked. Kiri turned into a dentist, pulling teeth without anesthesia. To everyone's shock, Kiri got his first victory. No one could explain how it happened. It shouldn't have been possible. While desperate screams rose from the people who'd lost money, Kiri looked at our boy. Kylan couldn't hide how happy he was. Then a very suspicious bald man said someone wanted to talk to our boy and told him to come along. In a private room, someone said our boy had real talent. He turned 3 coins into a total of 6,000, and that was a big problem for a betting house. That man didn't want to pay him. Kyan thought they were going to propose some kind of deal, but they were even dumber than they looked. The mobster asked what the boy could offer in this situation. Our protagonist said that if he took the hood off his face, things would get very bad for him. The mobster doubted the threat. It was time to rip that hood off by force, but one of the mobster's hands was violently pierced. That made our boy ask what was going on. He thought he was talking to dangerous criminals. That was when they realized they were dealing with someone truly unhinged. To their relief, our boy said he wasn't interested in the money. He'd rather take the gladiator Kiri home. But the mobster wasn't happy about that because the slave had started bringing in money. Still, within seconds, he realized that if he didn't agree, things would turn ugly. He started thinking it would be easy to see what that boy could do using his men. With an even more disruptive cut, the protagonist made it crystal clear who was in charge there. He said he was willing to take the coins, and even that man's life, if he was crossed. It was time for the mobster to decide. After that aura strike, the answer was obvious. He ordered his men to bring Kiri to the room immediately. What he didn't know was that it had been a bluff. Our boy couldn't repeat that strike. His weakened body wouldn't handle it. A thug said there was a big problem. Kiri wouldn't leave unless his sister came with him. Our protagonist remembered the rest of the story. His knight had lost something precious in that place. Kylan started to show he was getting impatient. That made the mobster move faster, saying everything would be prepared so they could leave as soon as possible. But our boy held out his hand in a threatening way. He wanted the entry fee back, the amount he'd paid to get in. Now that they were back in the dark alley, Kiri was a little worried. Coincidentally, his sister was the mute girl. They thanked our protagonist for the help, but they couldn't understand why he'd helped. Kyan handed his cloak to the girl and told them to be less suspicious because he didn't have any bad intention. That was when his face was recognized, the face of the third prince. Kiri apologized for having suspected someone so important. Our boy told him not to bow his head like that because they didn't need to do that in his presence. Those siblings had elf blood. They were hybrids, and their lives had already been doomed. Taking the opportunity, our boy said that exposing the shoulder like that is something beginners in fencing do all the time. Now the question was whether Kiri wanted to become a knight. The young man said he wanted to become a sword that could protect everything he cared about, not a knight. Our boy said the first step was to work as a shield. If he wanted to keep going down that path, he should come find him. and he gave the young man a sword. Kiri still didn't know why he'd been given something so important. Kion, smiling, said he needed a good sword. It was time for him to repay everything he'd received in his past life. Ellen was reviewing the most recent events and how our boy had saved that baron's life. The prince knew the chandelier was going to fall. Our boy went to meet his master. Ellen asked if he'd gotten into trouble because some of his clothes were missing. The young man said something had happened, but it wasn't a fight. His teacher understood it must have been a difficult task. Kion admitted it had been a very long day. He'd found his knife and set a trap to find whoever was poisoning him. Even so, he was still really anxious, maybe because he'd done too much in too little time. With the help of magic, Ellen began pouring some tea. Our boy said it finally looked like a major's office. His teacher asked if he'd been expecting some mysterious soup made with monster meat. And honestly, Kylan had expected something more impressive. The room was very ordinary, and the dagger without a sheath was a strange decoration. But the boy quickly realized what kind of tool it was. Ellen asked if the prince knew why it was there because it shouldn't be in his room. With a simple movement of his fingers, the dagger started to move, heading straight for our boy. A bit of blood hit the floor. Ellen noticed that even with a damaged body, our boy still had good reflex. He defended himself, but he pushed himself too hard. That was a magical tool made by Sustanian. It copies the hidden weapon of your opponent. Basically, it was a warning. Our boy realized the attack had been a bluff. Ellen confirmed with his own eyes that besides knowing how to use a sword, the boy could use aura. From the first time he saw him, he was sure their meeting had been strange, but even more absurd things kept happening. The boy didn't match what they thought they knew about him. When he learned he was being poisoned, instead of being scared, he was filled with rage. And after the incident with the Baron, it was time to tell his teacher the truth. Ellen used healing magic on the boy's body. His teacher probably already suspected his identity, but it was more likely he was trying to believe him. So, our protagonist said he wasn't Kylan. His real name was Baron Sacker. I didn't expect him to reveal that. He broke every regressor story. Now, the two of them talked more about the artifact called the Axis of Time. It seemed the real Kylan truly wasn't alive anymore. The professor believed our protagonist wasn't sure. He still felt the presence of someone else. He hadn't been sure before because it was so confusing. Ellen remembered the first time they met. Our boy said he wanted something about the royal throne. Now Ellen wanted to know what that was. Kion revealed he wanted to stop the war from happening. He didn't know why the queen's family was after the Axis of Time, but if the root of the problem stayed, history would repeat itself. Ellen asked whether our boy wanted to act because of his own motivation or because of his brother Chase. They needed to figure that out. Chase was the only heir of the other kingdom. There was no one named Baron in this reality. That information shocked our boy. He didn't expect that he wouldn't exist in this timeline or anywhere, which was foolish of him because he exists right now. Even so, the boy fell into a bizarre existential crisis, believing something had gone wrong, maybe because of the artifact's power. Now, he tried to understand why he was in this body, since he felt the old Kylan's presence slowly fading away. Our boy even wondered if someone had entered the body that used to be Baron, and he came to the conclusion that there can't be two versions of him in the same place, so he must have taken over the real Kylan's body. His teacher said Chase was already preparing to take the throne. The future of this reality was being chained. It wasn't for the third Prince of Q's to worry about those things now, because Chase would follow his own story. Baron realized he shouldn't cling to the past anymore. He understood his teacher's concern, but he was going to make one thing clear. His teacher's fear wouldn't come true, because when he woke up in that land, he completely got rid of everything that made him Baron. Words so heavy they left Ellen stunned. Now the protagonist asked if his teacher was okay. After hearing all that, Ellen, even though he was confused, still didn't understand his student's worry. And from the beginning, he'd made his alliance with one person, our boy. Outside, Kion asked if his teacher already knew about the Axis of Time. From his reaction, it seemed he knew something. Ellen said something had happened last year. Chase had asked him the same question. All he knew was that the artifact wasn't made by humans, and a month ago, he learned it had disappeared from the kingdom, possibly on the day of our boy's regression. That information scared Kion a little. He didn't know why the artifact might have vanished, but that wasn't a question that could be answered now. However, there was someone who might have that answer, someone the prince would meet soon. Ellen pointed to the statue of Sustanian, and our boy realized his coming-of-age ceremony is happening soon. Rosalita is the name of the event, when royal family members have to find Sustanian's empty nest and inside it speak with her will. But to do that, you have to make it there alive, meaning he needs to figure out who's trying to poison him. Baron believes that just this alone should have already led to someone getting caught. Back in his room, he went to examine that plant. Even though the butler was worried, everything went exactly the way the protagonist planned. Now it was time to find something seriously cool. Heading straight to the terrace, the butler questioned why they needed to go out there since it was freezing outside. That flower he received as a gift. When it dies, its pollen spreads through the air, and very few people know it has that trait. The tea was poured somewhere everyone could see. Kyan watched everyone's reactions closely. That was a deadly poison. Hardly anyone would survive it, and the plant should definitely have died. And yet, it was completely healthy, like someone had swapped the specimen. Finally, the butler understood what was going on. The pollen from that plant was drifting through the air. A trail left behind showed where the plant might be hidden, and it would lead the protagonist straight to the culprit, pointing toward the palace where, coincidentally, the queen of that kingdom lives. The protagonist watched the rain fall through the window. The butler slowly approached. The boy asked if he'd rested well, looking perfectly healthy. That left the butler stunned. He wasn't used to being greeted like that in the morning. The boy said he'd woken up early. That was genuinely unheard of for the butler, and the boy kept a close eye on the cup of tea. As he drank, he noticed it tasted different than usual. The queen had increased the poison dose. The boy asked if there were any events that week with all the nobles. The butler told him there would be a conference next week, and right after that, a huge banquet, the perfect day to stop drinking that poison. The protagonist took the antidote right after the tea, which made the butler curious. He asked what it was, and the boy said it was just vitamin. Since his body had been getting weaker, he should take them. Now, the butler grew thoughtful, staring at the teacup. The whole thing made him deeply uneasy. After what happened at the horse presentation, Plant stopped coming to breakfast. For the protagonist, that was great. It removed obstacles from his schedule, taking advantage of his second brother being there. Kylan said the flowers would bloom soon. A heavy silence fell between them, and the blonde boy decided to leave. Then the butler asked why the boy had brought them up. Kylan said he'd seen some roses while walking, and it reminded him that Randall used to grow roses. There was no hidden meaning behind it. Later that day, the protagonist trained a bit more. His physical condition kept getting worse, and he was sure that if he stopped training, his body would deteriorate even faster. He still didn't know how his master showed up there, but the teacher said he'd spoken with a king. That made the boy say he had two questions. He needed the identities of two people. Nothing complicated for his master. The second favor was to investigate some nobles who might be involved in this, especially the queen's family, which his teacher had already expected. That wasn't hard either. But the boy was giving his master a lot of orders. Kyan said the poison was even more concentrated now. He'd really found the culprit. Even the teacher already suspected who it might be. It must be hard to hide something like that from a great mage. And since it was an important matter, it was the perfect situation for Ellen to gain even more influence. The mage thought he was going to be used as a shield, but the boy didn't want that. He wanted to use him like a weapon. He still remembered his past life, and the White Demon Army made up only of major. In the future, Kyan wanted a battalion made only of that kind of soldier. The teacher was intrigued and said, majors aren't nice, and they're hard to train. But the protagonist insisted it was possible, which left his teacher deep in thought. Roma had been ignored when he had that idea because people thought it was impossible, yet he pulled it off. Still, he died soon after under very suspicious circumstances. The Mage Corporation really did become a military force used by Plange. Things were going to be different now, because the Queen's family wouldn't get in the boy's way, and he wanted to use the poison tea to negotiate with Queen Sis. Ellen wanted to know how that would be put into practice. All the boy could say was that things would happen soon. It was vague, and it made the teacher uneasy pulling something hidden in his sleeve. The boy said it should be used when the Queen made a mistake. Then the negotiation would begin. The infiltrated maids increased the poison dose, but the Queen was still furious. She was already hearing too many rumors, and it all made her deeply irritated. Someone approached the two of them. It was the Queen's son, who was also a tool in her hand. He came to tell her not to worry about it, but she said he wasn't capable of deciding anything. Even so, she kept suffering. Plant stormed off feeling useless. The Queen saw her own son as weak, and she was going to pave the way for him to become king in the future. On the day of the celebration at the palace, Kiri noticed his sister woke up in a great mood. She was excited about what was going to happen, too, and using sign language, she said they were going to see the prince. The girl liked the protagonist and was looking forward to that day's party. Kyan was getting ready in his royal clothes for the nobles' conference. There was 1 hour left before it all started, and the protagonist had a favor to ask his butler. It was time to settle this. The tea that was being delivered to the weakest prince. The boy finally met the Queen. From now on, everything would change. Outside, the butler was on horseback. He'd been given 2 envelopes, one to deliver to Ellen, and the other to the Majors Association. The first stop had to be the association, and the butler started to worry because his lord was going to the banquet alone. The boy said he was going to handle it this way, telling the butler to stay calm, but that was easier said than done. Something like this had happened before. Even while thinking something catastrophic could become real, the butler held on to optimism. Inside the Majors Association, a woman had already prepared everything. It was a huge amount of information, said Arya, the president of that city's association. But since it hadn't been revealed until now, it seemed suspicious. Ellen believed it was the result of political power. More and more intrigued, Arya wanted to know how the prince was going to use those material. Right then, the butler arrived at the association, and when he found Ellen there, he realized his job had gotten easy. He finally delivered the letters the boy had written. Alan was already preparing to travel, heading straight to where the banquet was happening. The butler said he couldn't enter without an invitation. That was when the mage said the protagonist was at risk of not surviving until the next day. In the letter, Kion said he was going to make a deal with the queen, using his own life. If anything went wrong, Ellen would need to fix it. Exactly 1 hour earlier, the negotiations had begun. Kion told the queen they needed to be honest. She agreed, but didn't believe anything would change. Faced with her overconfidence, Kylan told her to mind her manners, thinking he only wanted to argue. The queen stood up. Disappointed, she thought she'd be entertained for a few minutes. Before she left, Kion said he knew about the poison tea. He asked for it to stop being served, calling it disgusting. Shocked at being accused, the queen said she didn't know what he was talking about. Expecting that answer, the boy came prepared so she wouldn't do it again in the future. He brought a small container. Inside was a poison that stops the heart for a few moments. It doesn't react to silver and can't be detected by magic. Since the boy has the power of a blessing, his heart wouldn't be affected by it. But even that is limit. The poison needed to spread through his body. The first question the protagonist raised was, who would they suspect first? The queen started smiling like she'd lost. She said things wouldn't go the way the boy wanted because this wasn't her first time. She even said she was the one who took the life of the protagonist's mother. That made the boy furious, and he asked what he should do with that tea. The queen suggested he drink it all. As he drank the cup, the boy said her words would be taken as a refusal. That made the woman smile, believing no one would suspect her. Because not even the king could control her, Sis believed there was nothing she couldn't get in that kingdom. That's how she got the throne. All she had to do was remove the obstacles in her way. But there was still one thing she hadn't achieved yet, and she was working to make it happen. The protagonist started coughing hard after swallowing the poison until his body collapsed to the floor, badly weakened. The king and his brothers panicked over the boy. While they called for a healer, the queen smiled at the scene. Chaos broke out at the banquet. People thought someone had tried to poison the prince. Even if it was possible, nobody could say for sure. The nobles fell silent. Raising suspicions in that room could be deadly. Sis was impressed with her own power. No one dared say she was guilty of anything. The king rushed to the boy desperate, lifting him into his arms. He begged him to stay awake. The boy tried to speak, struggling. It made the king remember his late wake, and the last vow she made that he would take care of the son. They had a memory that will remain and will never be forgotten. Sis, despite all the commotion, announced she was returning to her own palace. Furious, the king asked if she was involved, shouting her name loud enough for everyone to hear. Everyone at the banquet went speechless. The queen couldn't believe it. Now the nobles truly started considering that something had happened. Hiding her face behind her fan, she said she didn't understand the accusation and claimed the boy was always sick. That only made the king angrier because it was exactly what she'd said when the queen died. When she gathered all the kingdom's knights, the same scene repeated years later. Sis took advantage of the fact the protagonist had been a very sickly child. She used the chance to say someone else had been present at breakfast. The second prince, hearing her accusation, the king ordered her to shut up, but she was shameless and knew how to act. She said she was worried about his children. She said it like she were a mother figure to the boy, which offended the king even more. Then someone unexpected spoke up. Planche said his brother was fine, and he'd never felt there was anything wrong with his health. He even remembered the protagonist used to tell them there was nothing wrong with him. Finally, the priest arrived to examine the boy. After being humiliated by her own son, Sis left the banquet using healing magic. The priest tried to do something, but something unexpected happened. A magical barrier made by the boy's teacher. It looked like he arrived at the crucial moment of the night. According to Ellen, that would kill the boys. The king grew even more terrified because his son needed urgent treatment. Then, they were told the boy had a magic circle in his heart combined with holy power. He would die with no viable option. The king became more and more desperate. Ellen said a healer with nature power could do it, but with magic alone, it would be impossible. Even the boy's teacher was having flashback. His own son had been struck by something similar. The scene was repeating for him too. His disciple was about to have his life cut. The expression on his face was the same one his son had worn one. Ellen hadn't expected to need that spell a second time, one that makes the target feel no pain at all. Obtundant was the name of that witchcraft. Outside the city, pamphlets started falling from the sky. The truth about the queen's family and the 37 people they killed. It sparked outrage. People now wanted revenge for what the queen did to the boy. The rumor set the population on fire. Ellen, now speaking with the king, said the Mage Corporation needed to be created. They had to use the situation where the queen was the guilty one. And coincidentally, he'd already been thinking about creating the Mage Corporation. Sis, waiting to speak with the boy, didn't know when they prepared something like that. To her surprise, the protagonist was fine. Even after spending a week on the edge of death, he was still weak, but he pushed himself as hard as possible to show strength, not weakness. For some strange reason, they were negotiating again. The boy said her deadline was different, and in fact, the queen was more willing to listen and accept proposals. Now, Tyling gave a mocking smile, saying Sis had forgotten something important. Her permission was useless now. Furious, Sis asked what he wanted. He asked for the knights under her control. It was time to get rid of that military force. That scared the queen, because it was her biggest asset. To continue, Sis would have to give up what was essentially her personal guard. Kion called for his butler, Soin, who brought some document, a contract guaranteeing the queen's word, and one of the clauses involved her death if she broke it. Done through magic, it would destroy the heart of whoever disobeyed. The second prince went back to taking care of his roses, and he found out the queen went to speak with Kion as soon as he woke up. Before Kion lost consciousness, his eyes met his brother's again. Another time, our boy had said the flowers would bloom, a sign that all of this had been planned. Now that he knows what actually bloomed, the second prince is thinking about cooperating. Even Planche can tell our boy is recovered. Things are changing fast. Sis doesn't want to make that magical oath, but to Kion, the only way to negotiate with a woman like her is with real consequence. He's just waiting for her to say the word. After thinking it over, furious, Sis grabbed a quill to sign the contract. The magic quickly started spreading through her body, showing the contract had been sealed. For our protagonist, this is the perfect situation. Before she leaves, Kion admits he never had a good relationship with his brothers, and that Planche didn't take that stance to help him. He underestimates what he doesn't understand, and if he'd said anything more provocative, the king's sword would have taken his head off without hesitation. After a long silent moment, Sis finally left. Ellen went straight to see his disciple, who had woken up, especially after hearing the queen had been there. It didn't take him long to realize Kion was starving, happily eating several bananas. Our boy said he did his part, and he's glad about it. Ellen said they got lucky. The half-elf sibling showed up at exactly the right time. That girl uses nature power as healing. Kylan really took a massive risk, and even he agrees, because he didn't know Hina's potential. That left Kion speechless. Not even in his past life did he know, because the girl died young. That only makes Ellen angrier, because that boy's plan was unbelievably reckless. Even so, Ellen handed Kion something he'd asked for, the elf siblings' document. They needed an official last name, and Ellen chose Baron, the old name of our protagonist. It's a small detail that made our boy really happy. Making them citizens of that land makes everything so much better. But Ellen said the idea was actually Roma's. Rumors that the king cares deeply about him are spreading more and more. Kion realized that something someone else should have felt later. While he was thinking, our boy asked the butler for a few more bananas, but Soyen had something important to say. He can't keep working as a butler anymore. Now, there's a flashback about the butler. He's going to see his brother, who looks extremely weak, covered in bandages. They talk about the noise the birds made them during the summer. The older brother, barely hanging on, asked Soyen to play violin for him later. The butler overheard adults talking. His brother's condition was getting much worse. Back then, he didn't really understand what it meant to not be able to have something, or to be someone who would never get to have it. After a while, his brother asked him for the truth. Asked if he was dying from that illness. Did a fire happen that they had to evacuate in a rush? It was caused by the butler's older brother. That was his way of leading a world full of pain. Winter came and eventually summer returned along with the birds singing. But nothing was the same anymore. Siegfried couldn't stand seeing his son isolated, so he forced him out of the room. That was when the butler saw a little boy in the square, the nation's third prince, our protagonist. That was the day the butler decided to become a butler. He told our boy everything, and even though he was someone close to him, he didn't know anything about what had happened to our protagonist. To make it worse, it was his hands that delivered that poison. Feeling horribly guilty about everything because he didn't know anything, Kion almost died. And he doesn't want that to ever happen again. Seeing the butler drifting off, Kion shouted to get his attention. First, he told him to say who he's looking at right now. It's the protagonist, and that's proof he isn't going to die. The butler has always been at his side, and this isn't the time for Kion to lose his banana peeler, because with his help, he's managed to endure everything up to now. There's one thing our boy is sure of. He knows he can trust the butler with anything. Swain is crying now like a child, realizing he still won't be able to go home, because he found someone he'll protect for the rest of his life. After pulling himself together, he promised he'll find everyone who persecuted our protagonist. Kailan said if he's going to get revenge, he should stay quiet because elephants make too much noise. The butler tried to take it back, saying he won't make that much of a scene until he realized the word Kion used for him. Elephant. That means Kion already knew everything. The butler wants to know since when he's known the truth, and our boy dodged the question. At least they went back to acting normal, leaving what was behind them. Our boy got pulled into a moment of intense introspection, where he saw himself, the former owner of this body, approaching him, walking his path toward who knows where. It felt like a thank you and a goodbye. Kion is falling, drifting farther and farther from that strange moment, until he finally wakes up in his own room. He held a morning ceremony, lighting a candle for the old Kion, who is now gone for good. Our boy said the old Kion seemed like he was in a hurry. He gave him the life he is now, but wished that our protagonist could achieve what he wants. For the old Kion, life was a prison, which makes our boy envy the freedom he must be living now. But so much has happened already, and he can't abandon it halfway through. Our protagonist decided he'll live this second life to the fullest. The knights previously under the queen's control were dissolved and returned to her family's territory, and the announcement about the Mage Corporation has just been made. After 3 months, our protagonist's servants concluded they need to call the tailor because our boy has grown a lot. When he went to meet the king, Roma was impressed by how tall the young man was. They're making preparations for Rosalita since it's Kylan's birthday. Ellen said he has someone to introduce to his disciple, the mage who will handle his security during the ceremony. Arson introduced himself and said he's honored to have that responsibility. His presence almost made Kylan have a heart attack. Roma said he's an excellent mage from the corporation because he's very talented. Our boy feels flattered, recognizing it was a big surprise while also trying to hold back his anger. The Mage Corporation is almost ready to be established, practically speaking. They still need a name, and there are still lots of adjustments to make. While the meeting is happening, Kylan can't stop looking at Arson. Ellen asked the king if he has a name suggestion since he's been thinking about something like this for a while. And he does. Vakhan. His answer came so fast that Ellen felt relieved he asked before suggesting anything himself. Our boy wants to know what Arson thinks. The mage looked a little confused by the question, and Kion clarified he meant the name Vak. What does he think? Still a bit cautious, Arson said it's a good name, and that's what got chosen. Later, using a silent spell, our boy told Ellen everything that happened in the past involving Arson. Even though Arson killed him in the previous timeline, there's no need to change guards. The situation changed and people changed too. Even so, our boy still holds a deep grudge over what happened. The one who came to see our boy was Baron Malir. It's been a while since the last time. Our boy apologized for stopping contact, but Malir feels deeply honored to be in touch with the third prince since he hasn't associated with any nobles so far. But our boy got straight to the point. He came to collect a reward for saving the man's life. In every sense, the Baron was expecting something like that. He's been trading diamonds and even horses with the imperial family. But the prince seems eager to hear something else. Malir said he still doesn't have anything to give him, and that made Kylan smile. Our boy asked if the noble could run another kind of business, and Malir said he has the people and resources for it. The problem is the queen's family has that, too. The Baron was confused because he thought he had Kion in his hand. But Kylan said it very bluntly, and it was unexpected. Our boy smiled and said, "That's true." Kylan said he's going to establish a mage unit. They have people and resources, but they need management. Malir asked if that's the cost of his life. Our boy said yes, that's the price he wants. Full of loyalty, Malir is ready to report for duty to someone who is supposed to die surrounded by people he can trust. All that's left is to find Sisfanian at the ceremony and ask why all of this is happening. During his birthday celebration, Kylan realized everything is properly prepared. Even his jerk brother is there. And it's been a while since they last spoke. As Kion walks away, Planche calls him Blood Eyes. Our boy said he won't tolerate that anymore. His name is Kylan. To his surprise, Planche said that isn't Kylan because he rides horses, uses sword, and even talks back. Planche wants to know who he really is. Kion also needs to remember he isn't Baron anymore, and that Planche isn't the crazy king he once knew. First, he has to wait a little longer until he learns from Sisfanian what really happened. Looking at his brother, he said he has a lot of wild ideas. Ellen said Planche might be an alcoholic, but he isn't stupid, so it makes sense. He found it strange. With time, Kylan realized his brother's suspicion will grow. They need to deal with that. Ellen reminded him that now he's Kion and nobody else. And that's exactly what our protagonist decided. Still, it isn't easy to forget he was Baron one. The mage tossed something toward his student and told him to catch it, a communication ring, so he can be advised when needed. It doesn't work where Sisfanian's power is present. It's useless in the castle. castle, but outside it works normally. Ellen also reminded him that everyone in that hall is his people. Commander Young introduced himself. He leads Siegfried's men, and they'll protect Kion all the way to Sisfenian's nest, which is in their territory. They're genuinely impressive, and they don't seem to like the fact their young master works as a butler. Soyeon asked if our boy needed anything before the trip started, and in front of all those knights, Kion asked the butler to bring him something to drink. To make it worse, the butler asked if he preferred tea. Once Kion decided, the butler told him to wait a moment. Kion obviously noticed those knights are really bothered by it. Ellen can't understand why his disciple seems to make enemies on purpose in the city. This ceremony seems very important, something rare. The big caravan is ready to leave. Blanche is still watching everything closely. The queen won't be coming with him, but she stays deep in thought. Our boy is going to travel with his master's approval. The Rosalita ceremony has just begun. Knowing what's happened recently, the king is worried about his son's safety. Ellen said there's no need to worry that much. Roma finds that confidence strained, and the great mage said, he didn't say anything special, but that's exactly the attitude that makes the king even more worried. Kion looks at the communication ring, and since there's no response, his master must be inside the palace. The butler keeps being extremely attentive, and that only fuels the knight's anger. Soyeon had already said something about it. Kion can't use magic, and his sword skill isn't that good, so the knights need to be even more careful because the young prince is basically a defenseless child. That only makes the knights even angrier. They're hoping young Master Soyeon will quit this lowly job soon. They still have to travel for 3 more hours. The butler suggested they stop to rest, but at that exact moment, everyone went on alert. Kylan realized this isn't that kind of situation. From the middle of the forest, a girl appeared asking for help. She isn't an ordinary person, she's an elf. After being rescued, she said her name is Sia, and that she's hungry. She'd been hiding in the forest. Kylan started to feel that first contact with her was really strange. The commander asked what they should do. Kylan told him to feed the girl. He also said that if she was being chased, she should have said so earlier. A hooded man on horseback is approaching. Kylan pulled a hood over the girl and told him to hide her. When the stranger got closer, they asked who he was. The man said he was chasing a thief. The commander said there were no strangers with them, but the man quickly spotted the child being hidden. He told the knights he wasn't there to cause trouble, and asked to take a look. So, Kion asked what the person he's looking for looks like. The wanderer said it's a young elf, and Kion told him to search for that. The girl panicked, and the wanderer headed toward her. As he passed by Kion ordered him not to turn around and to pay close attention. The two people hidden and watching weren't there to help. Their killing intent is aimed at the wanderer and the child. Once he confirms where she is, arrows will be fired. The wanderer looked back in desperation, and arrows were already flying. But all of them were stopped in midair by our protagonist, because he even warned the wanderer not to look back. The possible ambush put all the knights into combat mode. Arson put up a protective barrier around the protagonist. At least he's useful for that kind of thing. Even if Kylan doesn't like him, the arrows stopped coming. The attackers must have run. Arson said he'll take care of the child, and told Kiri to help our boy. Going over to our protagonist, Kiri saw something dangerous. That wanderer is about to cut the young prince's head off, shocking everyone there. Our boy blocked the attack pretty easily, and even used magic to counter, slamming the attacker to the ground. The knights didn't imagine our boy wasn't useless. Looks like the prince can do more than they expected. The butler was obviously terrified and started scolding our boy. He could have been seriously hurt, he said. Our boy isn't that good with a sword and not that good with magic either. But the knights who saw everything strongly disagree. Someone useless wouldn't have been able to do that to the wanderer, and not that easily. After that, it was time to talk to the elf child. When asked what she stole, she said Luca did it. She didn't do anything. Kion can't interrogate the child. She looks really shaken, so he called Arson to help. It's on him to understand everything the elf is saying. After a brief interrogation, Arson looked exhausted. The girl works in the forest, and she travels with Luca. It looks like he stole something from those men. The two of them got separated while they were escaping. On top of that, the girl answers before anyone even asks her anything. She doesn't know why it happened. It feels like some kind of clairvoyant, but she says it's not exactly that. Arson has the tough job of keeping an eye on the child. Kion is going to leave her at the next forest, so they won't be slowed down, and it'll be up to the lord of that region to investigate what happened. At that moment, the commander came over to talk to our boy. There is something really suspicious mixed up in that wanderer's thing, and he showed the artifact to Kylan, who was surprised too. Our boy knows exactly what it is. It's the poison he's been taking every day for a long time. Now, he wants to interrogate that wanderer personally. Now that he's locked up, The waterer said he thought our protagonist was just some young noble, but realized he was wrong. Kion answered that he's even more special than he'd imagined. Showing a small sample of the poison, our boy said he's not going to push for an answer. He wants the truth. He asked if the wanderer knows what it is. The wanderer said all of them had a bit of it. He thought it was something useful, so he stole some, too. Our boy asked what those people were looking for. The wanderer said he isn't sure because they were wearing masks. That left Kylan deep in thought. It doesn't seem like the wanderer is lying or trying to protect anyone. But if our boy figures out what the problem is, he might be able to help this man, since he's the very precious son of an influential family. The wanderer said his wife is in Hansen village, and those people know where she is. Kion promised he'd protect her no matter what. He also learned those men had dropped small marble stones about the size of a fingernail. He also heard they needed to be checked by a priest. Kion thought it might be a relic used by the priests of Tinsel, and Tinsel has been searching for sacred relics. So if they'd lost something valuable, they must be worried. Now the question is why they had that poison. It's used by Sakria's secret agents, so they won't be exposed if they're captured. The wanderer also said he heard what they call their leader, Blue Nightingale. It sounds like a code name, and it surprised our protagonist. Like a bird name tied to his father, and it's somewhere nearby. A heavy rain started pouring down, and it stopped our protagonist from moving forward, so he had to stop in Latland territory, which he didn't like. The lord of that place was already drunk, happy about our protagonist staying there. Hale is sure it's a blessing from heaven that forced him to serve the third prince. Earlier, the butler asked if our boy remembers Count Hale. He had sent our boy a gift before, one of the ones that got returned. He used to support Prince Randall, then switched his support to Planche. Our boy sees him as a social climber. Hale said he couldn't even sleep after hearing rumors our boy was in the area. Even the Count's butler looked embarrassed about it. Arson had to interrupt the meeting because he had something to tell our protagonist. Quietly, he said they caught the messenger bird. Our boy knew they tried to contact the Blue Nightingale, but the rain messed everything up. Hale offered the major drink, but it got refused. Clan asked if there were any priests of Tinsel there. Hale fumbled and dropped the wine bottle. He got furious and said, "Those priests are arrogant and claim that land is ruined." He kept getting more worked up, and our boy realized there was no point trying to talk it out. Using the little magic he knows, he put that lord into a deep sleep. Our boy was furious. Hale's words really got under his skin. Through the ring, Kylan told his master he'd gotten involved in the theft of that sacred relic, and now he's in danger, but using knowledge from his past life, our boy believes it's fine. Blue Nightingale has never failed a mission before, and she must already know he's the third prince. They need to investigate the place and look for priests to figure out what that spy is trying to do to them. A local bar seemed almost empty. Our protagonist went there, saying the people outside had followed him. A woman told him not to worry, saying she's not cruel enough to hurt people for no reason. Kaya admitted he was worried, thinking his caravan was attacked because they knew who he was, and of course, they knew the boy's identity, but that wanderer didn't want to hear many living people in that bar. Blue Nightingale said that man acted impulsively. Kylan asked if she's involved in this now. At first, the woman would have said yes, but looking at our boy, she felt the coldness of someone experienced and thought about going for him with her knife, then decided it wouldn't be easy. Our boy wants to know if the elf she's chasing is still alive. They've lost his trail in the forest. She doesn't like how things are going, and since none of them took much damage, she suggested our protagonist leave, promising to leave the child alone. To agree to that, Kion wants some questions answered. The first is why they're looking for a sacred relic if she isn't a priest. The woman started watching our boy with a hard, icy look. She said those objects are very valuable. Our boy suggested she planned to sell them, and she did say her main job doesn't pay that well. Our boy asked if the buyer of the relics lives in Latland. She said she doesn't have to sell relics that way. It would be much easier to find a buyer in queues. The woman said her buyer pays very well, and she already has a relationship with him. Our boy knows a Sakria spy can only build a relationship through one route with people who sell information about queues. To pay for that information, she's getting relics. After thinking for a bit, our boy is going to ask the last question. We go back to the royal palace. Many requests were made to the king. He's our protagonist, Matt.